Welcome back to the Ancient World podcast. So we're going to go through the Paradiso today, make a brief introduction, part one of it. So you can see on the left side an illustration of the third book from Dante, the comedy. And you also see all the three books into this one illustration. So in the middle you have Earth with Inferno at the bottom. So that's where the story starts, and it climbs through all the 9 rings into the center and then goes out and emerges on the side of the Mount Purgatory. And the climb of Purgatory is the second book, the cleansing of the sins. And then on top of the Purgatory, see this little green thing, and that's the Garden of Eden. And then that's where the second book ends, and then the third book is then the ascent through the ring of fire around the earth, and then through the 9 spheres of heaven and into the Empyrean on top. You see you have this white rose, and then the God and 9 circles of angels. So we're just going to give a brief overview of the different spheres and what they mean. And it's also worth saying here that the first 2 books are more like physical worlds that Dante is going through as the pilgrim, and then the third one is more like the spiritual journey. So it's not a physical place in that sense, it's not meant to be that. And he also then has Beatrice as his guide, as a symbol of emotion and spirit and revelation in some sense. And it's a recurring theme that he doesn't understand what she's saying, and that is because like the words are flying too high for him. And she already says this in the earthly paradise, the Garden of Eden, the end of the second book, that I am a part of this is to teach you the difference between the earthly and the divine. So you see the rings there, and then the structure are mirroring the 7 virtues. So after the 2 first books with the sins, you now get to the virtues, both the cardinal and the theological virtues. So you have prudence, fortitude, justice, temperance, and then faith, hope, and charity. So the first 3 rings are then for the moon and for Mercury and for Venus. And they are spheres where for the souls that were lacking to some extent for some of the virtues. So the moon, those who they were lacking fortitude. Mercury, those who were ambitious for earthly glory, so they lacked the justice. And then Venus is for the lovers, and they were lacking in temperance. So it starts with those 3, and then you get to the 4th one, the yellow ring, which is for the sun, and that is for prudence. And then you have 12 wise men, so that's the wisdom, with the number 1 person being Thomas Aquinas, who is the great hero of Dante in his real life as well. So Aquinas was the one who was merging Aristotle and the Catholic faith and made the argument of religion in terms of Aristotle's framework of logic and also metaphysics. So that's the 4th circle for prudence. And then you get to the 5th one, the ring or this sphere of Mars, and that is for fortitude. So those are the martyrs who died for their faith, and this is also the place where Dante is meeting his great-great-grandfather, who is telling him about his lineage of the family, and also he's telling Dante about his future. This is also it's a very nice and interesting part of the paradise, because this is where this Cacciaguida, which is the great-great-grandfather, is telling Dante about his destiny of writing this big work and the comedy, which will influence humanity forever after. And Dante has some doubts, like, should I really write this? How honest should I be? Wouldn't this, if I'm truly honest, will this not then upset the powerful people at the time in Florence in the 1300s, and the popes and the cardinals? And then his great-great-grandfather tells him that you should be honest, write the truth, because this will be nutrition for mankind for centuries to come. So Dante, as the author, is kind of making his own argument for why he should do this, and explaining his thinking behind the choices he's making in the whole work of the comedy. Also why he's choosing to put real and famous people everywhere in his work, because he says that in order to make this efficient and to make people pay attention, you have to put in people that they can relate to. So that's why he's choosing both mythological, well, but historical people from the Roman Empire and also from the church. So all of this is in the fifth circle, which is then from Mars, and then that's also this middle of the 10. We have 9 spheres and an Empyrean, so like a 10 levels. So this is the middle level, and it's also the middle of the book, Canto 17. So it's which for Dante is important as the center of paradise, and this is where he gets his calling for writing this work, and also he puts his family lineage into play. And he also it's full of self-irony and humor and kind of charm in the whole book. So he talks about that he has some pride in his family lineage, and he says that, well, even if he feels that when he's in paradise, he's not that hard on himself for feeling that when he's in his earthly life. So all of this is in the ring of Mars, and then they go into the ring of Jupiter. You see the little eagle on the illustration. So that's the eagle of justice, and this is one of the most beautiful parts, where he sees some text for in Latin, diligite justitiam qui idiutis terram. So terram is terra, like the earth. So this is from the book of Wisdom, Solomon, and then that last M transforms into this kind of emerald sparkling gem spectacle in the skies and full of lights into an eagle, and which then represents the divine justice. So all this is in the 6th sphere. And then the 7th, you have the ladder. So this is for then the contemplation of the monks. So this is for the temperate, the virtue of temperance. So then we've been through the 4 cardinal virtues of prudence, fortitude, justice, and temperance. Then you get into the 8th sphere, which is so all of this is the cosmology at the time, how they view the universe. So the 8th one is for the fixed stars. And this is a bit different. Now you suddenly have the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. And now Dante, as the pilgrim, is then being questioned by 3 important figures, religious figures, for his definition of, so St. Peter is the first one, but for the definition of faith, and then of hope, and of charity and love. Okay, and then the 9th one is the primo mobile. So that was the circle, the sphere. That's the first mover, which is putting motion and time into all the other spheres and to the earth. So, and there's also a thing with when he's in the fixed stars in the 8th one, he's been through all the cardinal virtues, and then he learns about the theological virtues, and then he's looking down at the earth, and there's this moment where he sees the earth as this little blue dot way down below him, and he feels it looks so small, which is then symbolic of how he has grown, like in his spiritual wisdom, and then he sees earthly life as something much smaller. And this is with humor and just beautiful poetry. So then, into the 9th sphere, it's getting even more kind of detached from the earth and earthly life. And then, so he gazes up for a moment, and then he sees this point of light, and then 9 circles, just like this flurry of angels. So the 9 orders of angels. And that's kind of, he sees, the point is God, and then he has all these circles of angels around. And so, yeah, and then in the 9th sphere, the souls, or like the angels that are there, are those who were never touched by sin. So then the last part is when he goes into the Empyrean, outside the 9th sphere, into this timeless, eternal space. So you have the white rose, and this is where all the souls live. He sees them reflected in all the spheres as he is ascending, but they live then in the rose. And then Virgin Mary, and so all the, there's another complicated structure of all the different saints and souls, and then their position. And then the final point is when he then goes into like the circles, and he ends up with seeing, what should we call it? He sees what he experiences as God and the divinity as a point of light with like as three circles, which is the Trinity, which is everywhere in the whole work, including the reflection of the work in itself, which is like 3 books, and it's also one work. So like 3 and being one is a repeated term and theme in the book. So you have 3 circles of light in the same circumference, and then kind of vibrating and reflecting each other. And he doesn't understand what he sees, and then he gets this, suddenly there's a great flash of understanding, but he can't put words on it. And then it's like he is dissolving into becoming the universe in some sense. Like his whole mind just expands into understanding everything. And yes, and then he's like the wheel, and then like what ends with the love that moves. She's becoming the love that moves the sun and the stars. So that's the end of it. And we're going to just read a little bit from the opening, which then frames the work. And also it has some important themes. Like, the glory of the one who moves all things penetrates all the universe, reflecting in one part more and in another less. I have been in his brightest shining heaven and seen such things that no man once returned from there has wit or skill to tell about. For when our intellect draws near its goal and fathoms to the depths of its desire, the memory is powerless to follow. So this is where he opens the scene for the for the third book, the glory of the one who moves all things. And it's interesting because it points more to the Aristotle concept of divinity in the metaphysics from Aristotle, perhaps even more from the Christian Bible, which is, but that's the point. Well, the ambition in part for Dante is to mix Greek philosophy with the Catholic faith. But then in this case, in the end, he ends up kind of leaning more towards the Greek philosophy, at least in my opinion. But so the one who moves all things is the concept of the first mover from Aristotle, because he makes the argument that what he's trying to make the inquiry, like how did it all start, and then he, through a long series of analysis and logic and deduction, he goes that it has to start with something that is timeless and without magnitude, because anything with magnitude that starts to push something else will, well, nothing of magnitude can start an eternal movement. So this has to be without movement. So without parts, without magnitude, and timeless. So this is a reference here, the one who moves all things. And then he introduces the topic that he will not be able to describe everything properly because it's partly above him as like a mere human and with the human mind. So that's the opening. And then last little part is the second canto, where he explains, he kind of warns you as a reader that the effect that it might have to read this book, which is it's an interesting little technique he's doing here and it's also in part it's kind of also like a caring move from Dante, that if you read this book, it will influence you, and you can't kind of unread it afterwards, and it might open some questions for you, and you also have to be a little bit careful. So it starts like this: all you who in your wish to hear my words have followed thus far in your little boat behind my ship that singing sails these waters. So we are then as readers in our little boat, and he's the big ship that's kind of sailing through the waters in front of us. But then it says, "Go back now, while you still can see your shores. Do not attempt the deep. It well could be that losing me, you would be lost yourself. I set my course for waters never traveled. Minerva fills my sails, Apollo steers, and all 9 muses point the bears to me." So it's invoking the Greek mythology again and the muses, and this "the waters never traveled" is partly also like his ambition for the work to describe the whole of paradise, and he also then has this "do not attempt the deep." If you lose me, you could be lost. So just stay with him. So, and it's a nice little, it's a gesture from Dante as the writer. Okay, so we're going to stop there, and then we're going to make more clips on the details of the different spheres and also the highlights, especially the ring of the sun and of justice, and also towards the end there. So hope some of this was interesting, and thank you for watching, and have a great day.